James is a social ecologist with experience crafting partnerships among communities, governments, and corporations. He has extensive experience in the Western Slope, having conducted the social impact assessment of the Rio Blanco oil shale project, the Community Vision 2020 project for the Grand Valley, as well, and mitigated impacts of Beaver Creek development on the towns of Minturn, Gilman, and Red Cliff. He provides consultation services to Holy Cross Energy and has long-term experience with energy projects for the BLM and the U.S. Forest Service. And with that, please give a warm welcome to James Kent, who's going to speak to us about working constructively with change, a social ecology perspective.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Let me set my timer. I know you guys want to go to lunch here. There it is. Aren't these things miracles? These little hand tools. Well, I appreciate being here, and I appreciate getting to know Kirby. It's been a long time since I got back. Actually, I left the Valley May 2nd in 1982, if you remember that date. That's when Exxon pulled the plug and Colony Oil Shale project shut down. And that's when we realized that we hadn't diversified enough. And that's really when I started this whole idea about social ecology, that you look at society from a people's perspective. And one of the things that's going on today is that the people want to be able to predict and participate in and control their environments, more so now than ever before. And to the degree you can help them do that, then they will absorb that project. To the degree that that doesn't happen, then they protect themselves. And so I'm going to talk today about, okay, where's my little button that changes things? I need a glass of water to her bottle when you get a minute.
Right hand one there.
Right hand? I reached back to Abraham Lincoln, who, with a debate with Stephen Douglas in 1857 made that statement. And what caught me about that statement is that in 1854, he was talking about public sentiment is everything. And with it, you can accomplish about anything, and without it, you can accomplish very little. And that was just before the Civil War broke out. Well, I'll be talking about now the development models that we've worked with and the socioecology approach. The traditional approach, which has been to design, propose, and defend, and the socioecology approach, which is to learn, engage, and benefit. Here's the old model. This is mostly what's still used. A project is designed someplace, pretty much not in the community, and it's then proposed or sold, and then it's defended. What that creates, all communities have cultural boundaries as well as administrative, but cultural boundaries are essentially the way people function on a daily basis. And it's when you intrude in through that cultural boundary, you get the reaction. And with an intrusion, what happens is that people have to pull back and defend themselves. And when that happens, it sets in the reaction. And then that goes to disruption. Here's what we talk about. You get into the community and you learn about it. You see what is happening in that community, how do they solve their problems. And then you engage the folks face to face and talk to them about what they're doing. Or you talk to them about what was an issue that you used to have here. But you learn about them. And then you look at how the project can benefit. what you've just learned. What we try to do is get the project inside the culture so it's our project, so the citizens own that project. That's the mission in our socio-ecology model. I'll talk to you about 3 parts of that. Informal networks and local routines, citizen issues. Issues are in 3 stages. They emerge, they exist, they get disruptive. We're used to the last one, of course, and then the human geography part. There are 2 systems out there. The one on the right is the formal, the vertical. We're all in that system. It's hierarchical. We know our positions. We know where things fit. It's political, economic, and ideological, and it's pretty well organized. You have bylaws, you have missions, you have things that you do by structure. On the horizontal or informal side, you have what we call a horizontal network that works this way. It works like a digital system. In that network is caretaking, which is taking care of each other in the informal network. The survival of how you survive day to day, and then the cultural maintenance, how you maintain your culture. Those 3 things are taking place. This system goes on whether you access it or not. This is a system that people use. In the characteristics of this system, you have respected leaders. They have flexible goals. They change, but people can handle them. They can change overnight. They have internal recognition of members. It's a word-of-mouth recognition. You're in a gathering place and you know who the character is there, and he's recognized as that character. You have informal communications, mouth to mouth, and then the way communication takes place is through what we call gathering places and natural routines. Here's a gathering place. I learned about a gathering place many, many years ago when there was, I was in a restaurant, and it was in Indianapolis, I guess, and I asked the lady, the waitress, if I could change a menu item. She said, no, can't do that. And I looked around and the restaurant was pretty empty. And so I go to another one down the street, looks like a cafe. I go in there, kind of full, and waitress comes up, and I asked the waitress if I could change a menu item. She said, baby, you can do anything you want in this restaurant. And so that changing a menu item was the way I began to look at the fact that it was a gathering place. Anything, they'll accommodate you. The other one was that the newspaper boxes are always out front because it's a communication operation. Is there a bulletin board? I was in a small town doing a project, and I needed to find out the history of that town. And I was looking at a bulletin board, and on the bulletin board was old timer needs a place to stay. I pulled the number off, called the old timer up, and we spent the afternoon talking about the history. I got it all at once. So the gathering place, are the signs friendly? One of the, when we were doing the Rangeley, when we were doing the Track CA project, Rio Blanco, Rangeley was one of our centers. And in Mac's Cafe, no, it was Anchor Cafe in Rangeley at the time, they had signs up says, no checks cashed, extra coffee, 50 cents. But as I was sitting in there, I was noticing that some people were getting coffee and some people were paying by check. So I give it a little bit of time, and I asked the owner, I said, you know, you got signs up all over the place, but you are, in fact, giving people coffee and not charging them, and you're taking checks. He says, oh yeah, those signs are to manage the transients. So they set up a system, so they didn't, what they were doing is they didn't want to use energy on people that weren't going to stay. So that was one of their management systems. Oh, we'll move on. In the informal networks, there's 8 what we call network archetypes. These are like, in the formal system, you have presidents, vice presidents, directors, and folks. These folks operate in an informal network, and it's important to learn who they are. A caretaker in a network is trusted by others. They have explicit trust because they help people, but there's no chit. There's no trade-offs. If you know a caretaker and you get in communication with them, it's like communicating with 30 or 40 other people. And that communication is accurate. So the caretaker is key, the communicator is really key. I was up in Craig on a BLM project some years ago, and I think there's a cafe there. It was Peter's, or I don't think it's there anymore, but I went into that breakfast place. Breakfasts are good times to work cafes and networks. And ranchers were gathering there because I needed to talk to ranchers, and there they were. They're all at the community table about 10 o'clock. And this was during the Iraq conflict. And that was when they were changing French fries to freedom fries. And the waitress was writing on the daily luncheon, cheeseburger with French fries. Oh, and the rancher started giving her, working her over a little bit. Say, oh, you got to change those to freedom fries. So she had enough of that. So she gets up, and she had written for the burger and French fries, $2.50. She takes off the French fries, writes up freedom fries, $5. And they started turmoil, what's going on? And she turned around and she said, freedom fries are a hell of a lot more complicated to cook than French fries. And that was her answer to well, what I'd found there was a communicator. She turned out to move information. I call it the 3 Bs, barbers, beauticians, and bartenders. They move information, and they move whatever information they have. So you want to get your information into the communicator so that they're moving accurate information. Otherwise, it's a rumor mill and so on. And also then waiters and waitresses, but the people that move information are really key. The other ones are key. This authenticator, during our oil shale project, you probably all heard the dueling scientists problem when you have a Forest Service permit or BLM, everyone calls their scientists in and so on. We look for the local person who's the authority from a local perspective, the local scientist, but not really a professionally trained scientist. And we had the same thing with Rio Blanco oil shale project. We had scientists in, and I went looking, and I found a guy named John Savage. I think he lived on Graham Butte at the time. But John was a rancher. But he also had been studying oil shale. And he knew the oil shale that the V2 rocket was fueled for Germany. And we brought John in, and he settled out our scientists. Local guy. I think his son still lives here, or is in the valley. Historian, they give you the index what is important in the history. Because what you want to know is, has there ever been any issues in this community, in this area, that didn't get resolved? Because if they did not get resolved when your project comes in or someone else's projects come in, they're going to get loaded into that project. We call it issue loading. Because they didn't get resolved, they're going to see if they can solve it and once that happens, you're really in your toes. You're in serious problems. So it's important to know the historian storytellers index what is important in the geographic area. We were working in West Virginia, and I was trying to find a road that would take me to a person's home. And the guy is asking, he says, well, just go down to the White House, the Smith House, and turn left. So I get in my car and I go down to the big White House, and there's a guy out in front. And I said to him, I says, is this the Smith House? He says, yeah, it's the Smith House, but they haven't been here for 100 years. So what you do is you learn to place names and place markers. I remember when in Aspen, when Maynard Bob, the president, wanted to change buttermilk to Tie-Hack, because Tie-Hack was more macho. So it was Tie-Hack at buttermilk. Boy, that sailed. Within 3 months, it was buttermilk again. So anyways, it's the language, it's the use of the language. It's Apex Mountain, not Aspen Mountain. And it's Eagle Valley or Upper Eagle Valley, not the Vail Valley. There's no such thing as Vail Valley. So when you're dealing with one of the commissioners in Eagle County, you want to make sure you know that it's Eagle Valley. You don't want to set it off. So you learn the language, you learn how to use it. Those are your characters. This is a traditional way of making a decision. The blue circles you gather and sort. It's your typical planning process in an agency or company. And you evaluate, you practice, you implement, and you meet the public interest, and then it satisfies the company interest. So the company to that process. What we've introduced there is the 3 stages of issues. The first one is the emerging issue. What we want to do is find out what issues are emerging in the community, in the neighborhood, and bring them into the company or the government so that you can get on top of that issue. At an emerging stage, issues are 100% solvable, but you only can find them if you're in the informal networks. By the time they begin to show up in the formal system, oops, how do you go back? There it is. Oh, okay. Is that the top? Yep. Gee, this technology is really great. Gee, that's okay. Stage 2, existing issue. If you don't catch them here, what'll happen is that this is more of a question. There's some strange trucks on our road over there. I wonder what's going on with those strange trucks. Existing issue is those trucks have put up a gate on that road, and now it's moved. Now we want that gate taken down, so it moves to existing, and you lose about 50% of your ability to solve that problem at the existing stage. But still, you can do it. You can feed it back in to your government or company and take it back through the process. So that what you're doing is you're solving the issues that the people have, so they gain ownership in what you're doing. If it gets loose and hits stage 3, a disruptive issue, you lose control of that issue. And when you lose control of that issue, someone else is going to make the decision about your environment, about what's going to happen in your environment. And generally it's the courts or legislature. One of the interesting things is people that are now organized around fracking and other know how to create this disruptive issue literally overnight. So if you're tied into these two and you have are working with the community, what's happening is that they become what we call a moderate middle. Now, and they then can handle and buffer some of the disruption. But the point is not to get into disruption. And so we say all issues have to stay local. Otherwise, you lose control. And that's what our social ecology process is all about. We'll talk more about that. Themes and issues, I'll just talk about that for a minute. Themes are generalized statements that are made that quite often we pick up on. In other words, we don't want any more growth. Can't do anything about that. Themes you can't do anything about. But we begin to respond to them. And when we do, we get captured. You start using resources, you start losing time. What you want to do is, what's the issue under the theme? What are the issues? And it's just clear as a bell. I was working a project in Hawaii, and this guy was adamant about no growth because it was going to be a resort project, but a lot of, you know, with a community center and community housing and so on. And then later, as we were talking, he says, "I wish my son and grandkids could come back home." And I thought about that. I says, that's growth. And then we started looking at coming home, and where the Hawaiians had really had to leave the islands. They went to Las Vegas, mostly Las Vegas. And we created a coming home project to bring those folks back to be with their families. And when we did, that was it. They were involved now, and we got the project rolling. This is, if you go to our website, jkagroup.com, the whole western United States is mapped this way. These are what we call human geographic boundaries. We start out at neighborhoods, and then we go to human resource units, social resource units, cultural zones, global units, so that you can track an issue and solve them in the right zone. These are what we call the social resource units, human resource units of Colorado. But what's interesting is very few of them are in Colorado. This social resource unit there in red, that's Four Corners. Literally, that is a sense of place. People that live there tie in to that geography. And then the human resource unit is essentially where the action and culture takes place. But when you cross a red line, you're crossing into a different culture. You're crossing into another culture. This is the San Juan, San de Cristo area, and it goes all, this was the old conquistador settlement area, and it still functions as a social resource unit. And one of the, it goes all the way to Santa Fe, but Santa Fe is not part of that unit, because Albuquerque is very different from Santa Fe, and you know that when you're in Santa Fe or Albuquerque, you talk about one or the other one. What was interesting, Region 2 of the Forest Service, which I developed a socially responsive management with them in the 70s, they were going to consolidate forests. So they needed to put forests together so that they could have consolidated management and mostly save money. And Forest Service is into ecosystem management, right? So there's three forests here, the Rio Grande, the Carson, Santa Fe. Wood gatherers, the culture works all through this area. And if you know the wood gatherers, you eventually learn who the caretakers are and so on. It would have been natural to put those three together. They put the Rio Grande with San Juan. The only way you can get into this unit from there is, what's the pass? Wolf Creek Pass. That's it. And I really went after them. I asked them about that. They said, well, we had to stop it there because that's our Forest Service boundary, separates Region 2 from Region 3. It wasn't an ecosystem at all. It was an administrative boundary system. That's all they were integrating. So anyways, total failure. They did it with, Lyle Laverty eventually did away with that, and they've gone back. This is our unit. This is your unit here. The Mesa unit, rifles about there. This is interesting. When we were working, Rio Blanco County goes like this. That's about, well, right there. And when we were working on the Rio Blanco Oil Shale project, we were constantly having problems. So finally we figured out that Meeker belongs to the cattle country and Rangeley belongs to the oil country. So we began to focus on Rangeley from the Utah side, from the cultural side of Utah. And we did, it cleared everything up. But when we were trying to go this way from the ranching side, that boundary there was created, that's the school boundary between Rangeley and Meeker. At least it used to be. When this was formed in 1954, there was a big fight after the football game, and that was the school boundary. Still is. So, let me see if I move this without going back to the beginning. Doesn't want to move. There you go. I just want to illustrate. This is Keystone Pipeline. One of the interesting things about social boundaries is they're the area of least interest. So if you're on a social boundary, that's an area of that people are not much concerned about. But if you're in the middle of that SRU or that social boundary, that's where the culture intensity is. This is Keystone 1, Hardesty to Steel City, then down to Cushing, and then of course down. This is a 30-inch tar sands, but it moves down to 98th meridian. The 98th meridian separates the prairie from the high plains. And it's an area of very low interest. So when they put this in, there was no problem. When the TransCanada started this project, I just know what happened. They sat down with an engineer and they said, we got to get the Hardesty to Steel City. How are we going to do it? I said, well, just draw a line right there. And that line bifurcated. These are social resources. These are the social resource units you saw on the cattle on the map. Bifurcated right through the heart of the cultures. And Ogallala Aquifer, which is sacred to the Nebraskans, and the Sandhills was where the battle took place. Once that disruption started and it got to a disruptive issue, it was nationalized. It was owned by the outsiders. And a guy by the name of Bill McBidden, 360.org, used that. He kept it going. One of the things that we make assumptions about is, from our world, is that, well, McBidden's just a troublemaker. He was more than that. He used this pipeline to train 3,000 anti-pipeline protesters to move out across the country. For 6 years, they gave him a free hand to train those people. And then they went out, there's all ideological, remember ideological on the formal system. Finally, you know, they're talking about, but you know, $10 billion they lost. What would that bought in some other way? This had been expressed in some other mechanism. Anyways, they're never going to go through there. Nebraska still got them held up, and they should if you can. They could have come down. Just north of that line is a cultural unit. It's in Canada. These all go into Canada, and come right back down and make that a 40-inch pipeline instead of a 30-inch. Lessons learned. Contact and engage with citizens early to avoid surprises. Citizens know more about their environment than any outsider, and they'll share that. But they share it with you informally. So one of the things that we try to do is make sure that you stay on point. Objectives of early engagement with the community should be learning informal networks, learn the language that people use, learn the actionable citizen issues that you can help solve, whether you're government or the company. People want their issues addressed, and they want to be able to recognize that you're addressing them. In a lot of our work, as we sit down and we do a lot of just have people draw what they want out of their community, and I don't know, you've been in, whenever you put a map up, people go over and they find their place, right? Sense of place, really important. And so that as you learn about the community, then the next is you have to engage them directly, face-to-face, word of mouth. In gathering places, do you ever wonder why people bring their laptops into gathering places to do their stuff? You want to socialize. And you can look at what they're doing or talk to them about what they're doing. But it's really an interesting phenomenon that people want to gather. And we have to access those gathering places. This is simple. Don't rely on formal groups or stakeholders in understanding community interests. You can understand what their interests are, but community interests are broader. Do not use public meetings as a means of initial citizen contact. That is so deadly, because the only people that will come to a public meeting if you announce it at the front end of the project are who? People are for or opposed. The 98% of the people I've been talking about won't come. Caretakers won't come to a public meeting unless they know that their issues are going to be discussed. And then the moderate middle shows up and holds the poles apart. But if you start with a public meeting as the beginning of the process, it's deadly. Understand human geography reflects the cultural boundary. We've covered that. Deal with emerging issues. It is that stage of development and taking it home. Okay. Our process is called discovery process. See where the public meetings are in time and sequence. They're way down the line before you hold a public meeting. You do the face-to-face, one-on-one contact at gathering places. We quite often, when we were doing the Vision 2020 with the Grand Valley, we had chat sessions in people's neighborhoods. They knew where their neighborhoods were, and we sat down and had chat sessions. And it was through those chat sessions that we began to realize that even though we were doing this 20 years after Black Sunday, that issue was still embedded in the word of mouth system. And it haunted any decisions that you're trying to make. And we had to address, we find embedded issues. You got to find what issues are embedded in order to understand where you can position your ordinances or projects. Then neighborhood gatherings, if they work at that time, and then in time, then this is real much later for your public meeting, because now folks will show up that would not show up at the beginning. This is just a webbing chart that what we need to do in the informal system is web them into the formal and bring the action back so people see that things are happening, and back and forth. It's an old Indian concept that is used to make sure that, for instance, in the Dakota pipeline, I've written a column on that. I write for the Right Away magazine. And one of the interesting things about the Dakota pipeline is the chief. The chief has two functions, and you need to understand that. The chief is a chief when there is the elders, the ceremonies, all the informal stuff comes from the chief. He's the chairman of the council on this side. What generally happens is people come in and they meet with the chairman of the council, and you need to start to meet with the chief and the elders and the youth and those folks who are going to be impacted. And then you can get to the formal system. All right, that's it. I'm not going to do that piece. There is a piece, if you get into the slides, we call it, we're working on it now, it's called social scoring, and it's a social risk score. The engineers or the right-of-way group that I've been working with for about 6 years said, Kent, you gotta quantify this stuff. We can't work with what you're doing. So what I did is I took 12 variables. I think like low risk was if you're 200 feet from a playground boundary or school boundary and so on, you're okay. Low risk. Medium risk at about 1,200 feet. High risk, 500 feet. And so what I've done, if you look at that, you can see that I've scored it then. Then you come out at the end with a score. You're low risk, you're in good shape. Medium risk, got work to do. High risk, lots of trouble. But anyways, that'll be produced pretty soon for the engineers. Thank you very much. Enjoyed it. They're hungry.
I saw in the engagement you started with the one-on-one, but one of the problems you might have, or operators might have, is identifying who those one-on-one people, those top people are. So sometimes I found it effective to flush, find out in a community meeting who those kingpins or whoever one-on-one people are, and then engage them, and then try to, discuss with them what you're planning.
Right. Yeah. You can. However you find them. We find them in the gathering places. If you hang out in the gathering place, like in the morning between 6 and 8:30, the workers are in there. But there's usually a macho guy in there. You know who that is. And then between 10 and 12, the business owners show up. And in the gathering place, there's generally a character. And that's the person you want to identify. Because what you're trying to identify are the informal caretakers, because those are the ones you want to sit down with and talk things over. What we usually say is, once we found the caretaker, who else should we talk to? Pretty soon you're getting other names that come from them. And then you begin to expand that out. But the chat sessions are really important at the informal level in the neighborhoods. People love those.
James, your information is as fascinating today as it was 17 years ago when you came to Craig, Colorado, and helped us out with some BLM issues.
You there?
I was.
You're not. What's your name?
My name's Jeff Comstock.
Yeah. Okay.
Yep. And so I guess the thing that fascinates me a little bit is the informal network, and there's absolutely truth in what you say about that. And I guess the question I have is how social media and the Facebook craze, all this stuff, is how that's affected that informal network when the kids aren't doing the same things in coffee shops that maybe the elder crowd is. And so I'm wondering if you could give us a little bit of take on how social networking and the younger generation's communication styles affect that informal network.
Well, I think that's really important. The next generation, of course, is the youthful generation, and the one that is using social media and networks. But one of the other things is, where do they hang out? Where do they get together and talk? Because one of the things that, like I said, in the gathering places, people bring their machines in. Now, kids do the same thing. Like in libraries, there's a library in Denver that has a juvenile room. Well, you go in there, they're not on their machines. They're talking. But what you want to do about social media is really monitor it, because a lot of rumors and half-truths go through the social media, and you can pick those up by essentially in the gathering place or one-on-one that you can check the facts. because then you can put the input back into the system, back into the communicators, so that you just don't let the social media run wild. You have to really look at it and be on it. But I find that with the kids, the sidelines of lacrosse, sidelines of soccer, great place to talk to kids. And then you can set up meetings with them and that sort of thing. But what you don't want to do is let social media get control of who you are and what you're doing. It's really dangerous.
Any questions?
From Rangeley or from Craig at school. I think we're done. Thank you.